Hmm. Oh, okay. I think we're streaming, and I
Where are
also
we?
want to record to this computer. All right. Thanks for joining me, Amber.
Of course, Elizabeth. Anything for you?
Yeah, I wanted to tell the story of Ipade. I did not want to close shop and disappear and have people have no idea what happened. And
Mm,
I feel like my experience opening Ipade, running it, and everything in between that led up to closing down, other people might find lessons from, they might find value in hearing. And in this whole experience of Ipade, I've been really transparent from crowdfunding to all the things. I've been very, yep. And so I
mhm,
want to be transparent with the wind down and the closure and the lessons learned. And I also want to hear about your creative process and the things that opened up for us, um, taking this creative journey, this business journey. So this is just space for us to chat. And I didn't want to do that by myself. I was like, who could I do that with except for Amber?
Oh, Elizabeth. Look, you
Yeah.
got me emotional today. Okay, yes.
I know. I was like, I cannot cry. Whatever I do.
You can cry if you want. I know you're giving your setup, but I'll let you finish and then,
That's the setup. That's the setup.
okay.
It's a very personal experience
Mhm,
putting an idea out there and working hard to see it come to life and to do everything you can and to also know when to stop.
mhm,
That's a
okay,
very personal thing.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, there will be emotions, and thank you for for accepting that.
Yes, of course, of course. I feel like, yeah, I think as Black girls, I often look up and be like, man, what have we gotten ourselves into? But just running with dreams, running with possibilities. And I will say, thinking about the beginning of Ipade, wow, this is kind of like dueling work, but thinking
Mm,
about the beginning of Ipade and when you visited me in Los Angeles, you came and sat with me at a new beginning in my life.
mm,
And through that, I've always been so grateful that I remember you sitting on my couch and be like, when I start this thing I want to start, I'm going, because we thought about like pop-up iterations that could
yeah,
be in LA and stuff. And you're like, when I start this, I'm gonna have you come in and design it. I was like, sure. Like, I would
yeah.
love to do that. And you made that happen. Like, you really made that happen. And I think the work we've also known each other for years before,
Hmm.
years and years and years. I just a
It's
special
like
time
over a decade now, I think.
over a decade from doing reproductive justice work to
Yeah.
me sashaying into your office when I was but a what 23-year old working in DC and just being exposed to all these amazing Black women who had these phenomenal careers working on behalf of ourselves and our communities and what our communities deserve. And I think watching you take that same energy um, and apply it to a space like Ipade has been phenomenal. How you brought people into that, specifically me, and then also how ultimately you applied those same things to yourself in your life because how we run our businesses, how we move through politics is a direct reflection of the lessons that we are learning about ourselves and the lives that we want to lead, which I think is so special in you, even having this kind of closing conversation in one of the ways that it came together. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of that.
Yes, and thank you for doing it. I remember, oh, this was from like the wing conversations.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember
Oh.
I remember being at the wing and you telling me, I want to do interior design, I want to do this, I want to do that. And that's just something I had filed in the back.
Mhm.
And whenever I do a thing, my approach is always to give people opportunity to do their thing as part of it. And so I
Hmm.
said, well, yeah, you want to do that. I need somebody to do it. That's not my specialty. I'm not a super, artsy creative, right? I have
Wow,
different
look at
skills.
Elizabeth, a flower. I've said this since I met her. A black
What?
beauty. You're a black beauty flower. Like you're so creative. It's on you, you know?
Oh,
Yeah, you do it for
but
yourself.
I bring people in who I know, like I know I don't have everything, and
Right, absolutely.
the world be a really interesting place, right? If other people didn't bring all their skills. So I was happy. That was part of the vision of Ìpàdé, is to have people do their thing as part of it. And you did your thing, like as part of it. And
Mhm.
I remember the very first that moment before we had my brunch at the first space where I
Uh-huh.
was like, wow, this looks like the vision board. I'm like, I'm looking around because it looked like the vision board, and you had that special skill to bring a picture to life. So,
Mhm.
what I would love to hear from you, what was that like for you creatively, and where did that kind of take you?
For me, creatively, I think it was one of those things where like someone you who trusts you and who you trust your friendship and relationship with kind of it does take an invitation, right?
Mm,
Because um creatively, Ipade, the way you talked about it is how I envisioned it. A lot of what you talked about with Ipade was a space to gather, was a space for cultural legacy.
mhm,
Um, you talked a lot about textures and bright colors, and ultimately, it was a space where anybody could come, but where Black women and women of color could come and do their work, right? And when I think about the work that Black women and women of color do, regardless if it's political organizing, small businesses, it's meant to take care of themselves and their families and their
mhm,
communities. Like, but my experience, and I'm sure you could, when I worked at offices, it never looked like me. It never looked like the
mhm,
type of work that we were actually doing, which was
mhm,
this big cultural legacy we're building for not just right now, but for the future. It never looks like that in offices. I look back on my time at like when I worked at Planned Parenthood, I was working in a cubicle. When I worked at, I had an office at another job, and I remember the thing about that office was I had a photo of Beyonce from her Super Bowl performance on the
mhm.
wall. Like I always try to, and when I was working in the cubicle, I had images of like the Black Panther, women of the Black Panther Party,
Mhm.
like because that's how I felt about the work. And that is creatively, it was an opportunity to create a space of like, if I had to come in here and do what it is that I'm committed to doing, what would I want it to feel like? And I remember we were
Mhm.
having early conversations because whenever it comes to design, I first have a conversation about color and how far we're willing to go with color because so much of our world is white and
Mm.
beige and gray and
Millennial gray.
millennial gray. And, you know, I'm a very woke girl. And I know that this is too a type of
Mhm.
aesthetic white supremacy. Like it
Yeah.
really is, they have figured out to even put it on the walls. And some people don't think about
Mm.
it like that, but I definitely do because if you travel outside the country, you see color. You see color. When
I
you go to Cuba, when you go to Mexico, when you go to these black countries, there is color represented. Our color, at best, it is weaponized against us, where they want to throw up a
yes.
mural of blue people in a black neighborhood, you know, like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
trying not to cuss. But so I was like, okay, I always thought about it of like knowing the type of people who we are and who would come into this space. I always thought about it in terms of like, what do I want in the background of their Zoom calls? Like, look at both of our
Mm.
images.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
what do I want when they're on the phone cutting a deal? What do I want around them that gets them to add another zero to the price?
Mm.
That is truly what do I want to add that gets them that they are seated so comfortably that their nervous system prepares them to not only
Mm.
ask for what they need, but what they want out of the
Mhm.
interaction when it comes to business and working. So
Mhm.
that is what it was for me. Like, and being able to take that doesn't look like white walls.
No,
That
no.
looks like something completely different, especially for Black women. Like, they say when there's certain things, especially when we all started transitioning from and I realized that, sorry, you mentioned the wing. That's
Mhm.
how the wing was designed for those white ladies.
Yep. Yep. Now you say
We
yes.
talk we talk about the girl boss movement, but the reality is them girls made their money.
Yeah.
And it's because they were in spaces like that that not only allowed them to feel powerful, but it
Yep.
also allowed them to connect with each other. And I felt like this was a perfect place to bring that in-house for people who look like us. That's
Yeah.
what I felt when I was at the wing. And even as much color that would be up at the wing, it still felt slightly uncomfortable for someone like me.
Oh yeah, the pastel pink and the beige
Yeah.
and the no, it wasn't ever completely comfortable. But as Black people and Black women, I think we've spent most of our lives and careers fitting into places that are not comfortable. So it
Right.
wasn't unusual for me to step into a place like the wing.
And write yourself in. Like,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
comparison to like a WeWork around that time. That was
Yeah.
designed the nitro cold brew being on tap. That was designed for white men to be able to come in there and make money. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just felt like on top of that, a big way that you were, and I'm grateful for the design aspect of it because I really wanted you to have something that wasn't just about work, but one of your intentions was to gather so that that space can transition not only into a place where you can come down and sit on your computer, but where you could come and have your celebrations.
Yep. Yeah. And I will add on one of the big things was to have a beautiful space.
Right.
It had to be beautiful. And you and I talked about it also being comfortable.
Hmm.
Uh, in its beauty, it also needs to be comfy, cushy, cozy. And
Hmm.
I will say that with the work we put into it, your design, some of the legwork I did on like finding pieces, which
Yep.
was a lot of the fun part,
Hmm.
people felt comfortable. They felt that when they walked in, they didn't even have to sit down to feel warmth, to feel welcome, to see themselves reflected, to be in awe of what Black women had created. Um, so all the intention that we put into it was realized.
Hmm.
People were able to get work done. They were able to feel safe enough to woo-saw and to celebrate. I've literally seen where people were having they just came in there kind of frantic and scattered. And then we're like, oh, I can take a breath. I can have a sigh of relief because the space was just imbued with that energy. That's an energy. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
that creative work put into the space.
Hmm.
Um, so it really, I think it was a very meaningful space for a lot of people, a really transformative space for some people, and certainly comfortable for anyone who walked in.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think the one of my favorite things about both of the locations that really got actualized in the first spot was the wall gold mirrors.
Hmm.
And that was so special for me because I treated it not just as an interior design element, but kind of like the way it was created was meant to feel like an installation art piece.
Mm.
And you asked how has that impacted me creatively? Since doing both of those spaces, I was able to, I was scouted to do exhibition here in LA called Witness, where I not only got to enter in my short film Abundance into it, but I also did an installation piece, which was a vanity that I had kind of like refurbished. And
Mhm.
I called it Vanity a Weeping Post because I see us being able to sit in not only our glamour, but
Mhm.
our reflection as a space that can do more than just prepare us for the world, but actually allow us to move through very hard feelings. Like all of us have experiences of like what the tops of our grandmother or our mother's dressers look like. Where
Mhm.
did they get dressed in the morning? Like those kind of things. Like I was really excited to add that kind of like hyper detail to the
Mhm.
Ade space, um, that has really impacted my work moving forward in
Mhm.
terms of themes through
Mm.
physical items.
Mm.
As an artist, like I know that I love to use mirrors. I love to also use sound, and I love to use spaces of retreat and rest. So having stools, having couches, having velvet, um,
Mm.
and all of that being centered around a mirror, because I also feel like we should be able to look at ourselves in that kind of comfort, even if we're going through something,
Yep.
even if we're moving through different things. So that's really how I have applied it to my art the most. And even having this conversation, I'm glad we're having it to get it on wax because I was just thinking about how I want to do more installation work. Like,
Yeah.
um, as an artist, as a storyteller, and why, like, even to hear you say that I was able to take a picture and make it real, that's
Yeah.
how I view filmmaking. That's how I view my writing. Like, how can I turn this from an idea to a thing that's actually material and tangible, something you can actually touch or be able to watch in its entirety?
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to mention the mirror wall in the second space in particular on the lime wash wall that we
Hmm.
did ourselves.
Oh my God. I have line wash on now. I did not do, I hired someone because
Oh, you
that
didn't?
labor intensive, honey. People like, I love the line wash. I'm like, you better.
Yeah, the labor of love. That's why I say it was imbued, infused with all
Yeah.
of our love and intention because we did that by hand and you did the mirror wall by hand. I
Mhm.
collected the mirrors from around DC and
Yep.
Virginia and Maryland by hand. And that was the biggest hit
Could
in the
not
space.
order it. Could not order nothing
Oh no,
except
you'll never
the paint.
find my
Shout out to
stuff.
Sydney Harbor Paints. But like, those are things you hit the ground for. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Feet on the pavement, lots of experiences. I remember where each piece came from, where I got each piece.
Mhm.
And that and the green velvet couch centerpiece of the second Ipade. And I want to also tell people why there was a second Ipade to get in some of the business aspect of it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So first Ipade, 1700 Connecticut Avenue, Northwest, fourth floor, above Secundy and Teism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, That was a good first spot because it was right post-pandemic and I still was really focused on the co-working aspect of it. So the rent was a little lower. I think at that time the rent I had started was like 7,000,
Mm-hmm.
which okay, is not nothing, but compared to what it could have been. So like pre-pandemic, that would have been $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 7,000 a month, I believe, and it had office space and the room in the back.
The little
Um,
kitchen type setup.
yes, oh, the little kitchen with the
Yes.
bistro.
Yes.
Yeah, that was so fun. It
That was
we
so
got to
cute.
yeah, we got to be creative in that space as in the second. Um, But with the first one, I had a year lease, right? Again, post-pandemic. So this was April 22 it opened.
Mhm.
And I had a year-long lease, which was great because I wasn't locked into something long term.
Mhm.
And that gave me an opportunity to experiment to see what was going to work and what wasn't.
Mhm.
And I quickly learned that the co-working aspect was not going to pay the rent.
Mhm.
And I remember calling, I had reached out to somebody else who ran a co-working space in Silver Spring. Hers was mostly for like photography or people could rent and, you know, come co-work or do photography or some like mixed use space. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm here. There's not a lot of people here. Um, and she said, oh, you should try Peer Space and do events or do different things. So that's when I opened it up for um different types of work to happen, creative work to happen, gatherings and celebrations to happen. Um, I did pop-ups. So that kind of opened into that more of a different type of gathering. So beyond networking and connection for Black creative and professional women, it then became uh more of a community space.
Mhm.
Um, and they tried to raise the rent on me by like $3,000. Oh no, I was paying 10,000 at that space. That's what happened. I was paying
Wow.
10,000 at that space. They then tried to raise it to 13,000. And
Because
I
they
was like,
saw what it could do. They saw it.
it
Greedy.
no.
Mhm.
I mean, they
Mhm.
saw the potential of the business, but in that physical space, it wouldn't have worked. So I said, no, I'm not paying 13,000 a month. Um, again, barely breaking even at 10,000. Actually putting up a lot of my personal money and consulting money at the time into covering rent.
Mhm.
And so we moved to 1734 20th Street Northwest at the same 10,000 a month, but with a more open space to do events,
Mhm. Mhm.
to do more gatherings, because that was what was bringing in the money. And at this time, I was definitely still interested in exploring the possibility of what Ipare could become.
Mhm.
Um, so that's how we got to the second spot with the lime wash, the green couch, mirror wall, and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm trying to think about where I want to take, how I want to tell the rest of the story of that experience as a business owner. Um, but I don't want to keep talking. What's on your mind?
What do you think you so I live in Los Angeles and I would come in to do this work with you.
Hmm.
And one of the things I've noticed, because I'm starting to do more in-person events here,
Hmm.
is I always find it interesting when I'm talking to, because we both have done work in or doing work in political organizing spaces. And
Hmm.
sometimes I talk to people about funding, and they will outwardly say that they don't fund parties. Um,
Mm.
in a time where people are scared to they protest out of absolute necessity, right? Like
Hmm.
absolute boots on the ground, full force. They are killing our people, right?
Mm.
Um, but there are moments in between that where you need to be doing your base building, your recruiting, your values training, and getting people on the same page. And I have found that that happens in moments of joy and gathering.
Hmm.
And being a regular somewhere, be it a party, a coffee shop, what have you, is a way to not only know who your people are, and literally, because we are in war times, right? Like, know
Yeah.
the people who are on the same page as you, or at least making sure to try and be on the same page as you, right?
Yeah.
But it's also how we connect each other to resources, be it you're looking for a job or you need to find housing. Like those things are just as important as fighting structural institutional racism. But also, what
Yeah.
I've learned from gathering Black people, especially in spaces, is that that also has a system of institutional racism, right? Which is we're being controlled through not only the rent that we're paying to live our like live in our homes, but
Yeah.
also the rent that we are paying to have safe harbor, right? Like
Yeah.
a gathering at Ipade is very different than a gathering at the Marriott, okay?
Yeah.
Um, and what that kind of can give you. So, yeah, I'm basically learning in real time, like how, especially white business owners, respond to you bringing a bunch of Black people into their white
Girl,
space.
girl, girl.
And on the other side of that, how special it is for a cultural organizer, for an event person to be able to bring a bunch of Black people into a
Mhm.
space when we know that we are heavily policed in spaces, right?
I
Um,
got reported on.
And
I
let's
got,
talk about how one of the biggest ways we are policed is not actually through us participating in any kind of harm or
nope.
violence or any, it's through our sound. Literally, the sound of us gathering is an issue for people, right? So I would love for you to talk about that. Like, how do you manage navigating people who are like, I hear black joy. I hear
Yeah.
gathering. I hear fun, even though businesses are made to be successful based on
Yeah.
how many people they can gather, which comes with some noise.
Yeah. It was really a mind fuck. I'll just say that.
Mhm,
To have this business that the landlord was aware of what the business was doing and meant to do.
mhm,
And but things changed when they wanted to bring in another tenant who would fluff their pockets.
mhm,
So there's a yoga studio. They wanted to come in below me. Um, and the building is very old, not soundproofed, nothing. So you could hear a pin drop, literally. They could hear quarters rolling on the floor. So it took them about a year or so to figure out what they were doing to get their permits and stuff. And then they started doing build out. We had issues. Um, but it didn't really hit until like they properly moved in and they could hear all the feet, all the, you know, everything. And so I'm going back and forth with him, whatever. I can fight a fight. I'm an Aries. I can fight a good fight. It's not a problem. Right? It's not a problem for me. I got the straw for them was I got a last minute request for a Howard homecoming brunch
mhm,
led by Black men. Um, what they could not tolerate was hearing Black men's voices on the steps. There's the stoop outside of the second Ipade. They were like, we could hear people talking on the steps. And she came over, one of the owners came over and confronted my guests.
ah,
I was in the back, and I guess they were trying to run some. They didn't know what she wanted, so they were trying to pretend like I wasn't there or something. Like, what do you want with her? I think that's what was happening because she allegedly later said, "Oh, I was asking for you, blah blah." Blah. They told me she'd come over. I said, "What?" So of course I go down there and I have words. I'm not afraid. I have words with them several times about protecting my business, protecting my guests. You're not
mhm,
like um trying to succeed, which at the time was let me succeed by paying my rent and not getting evicted.
mhm,
Um, well, also again, maintaining the integrity of the space and what it's supposed to be. So of course, brunch, they had a cute little setup, classy, but again, there was music, there was steps, there was Black joy, there was
mhm,
probably singing along to songs.
mhm,
There was being outside on the stoop, having conversation,
mhm,
which apparently got in the way of the whites having a good yoga session.
Which,
And
as a yoga studio, why would
I
you move beneath an event planning
I don't know. I don't know. To
violence?
take up space. To take up
Literally,
space.
you are deciding to take up space, and with that comes some responsibility.
To take up space. I was here. I talked again, there were many conversations. I talked to them prior to them signing their lease, and they went
Mm,
ahead and did it
mm,
anyway.
mm,
But some of this, there's a spiritual component to some of this, but I'm gonna get to that in a minute.
mhm, mhm,
Because white folks taking up space or palm colored people taking up space, they weren't necessarily white, but they were white appearing.
mhm,
It's it's a spiritual, it's in their blood. We can talk about that. That's another conversation. It's in their culture, it's in their blood. I'm learning like to be disruptive of whatever Black people are doing.
mm,
So there's that level of racism. At that point, I was like, look, there's nothing I can do. This is how I pay my rent. Do what you have to do. So apparently, a week or two later, I got a note that the fire code, they came to inspect the fire code or something. It was like a whole, yeah, reporting to DC government. Um, they had wanted to do an inspection, but like Ipade is by appointment only, so there was no one there to like do anything with. Then there was like a notice sent in the mail that I had to respond to about violation of my uh certificate of occupancy and all of that, which I pushed back against because I'm like, look, here's all the things. And at that point, it was like my lease was coming to an end. A lot of things had happened. I was not aligned with the work of Ipade anymore. And that's where we get into the spiritual component. So I was like, look, we're closing anyway. Like, leave me alone. We're closing. Um,
uh,
so that got dismissed, but at the same time, it's like those are the things you have to deal with as a Black business owner.
whoa,
Yeah. I'm just trying to pay rent.
right,
People are not doing it's like not a nightclub. People are not doing anything ridiculous. There's no shootouts, there's no arguments. Like literally people celebrating Howard homecoming with a brunch with music.
right.
And that's too much for y'all.
So they just started to call the city. They did like they just called the feds on you,
Pretty much, yeah. We had tried to talk things out, but there was not like our two business models were never going to align.
and you were there first, and they knew that. Like
Yeah.
I'm
But
always gagged by that. Always gagged by that. Always gagged by the audacity, which is like I think a lot of we just have to decide to be our own type of audacious, you know.
yeah.
Um, I think sometimes when we talk about black businesses that like so I think about it a lot. Like you ever go to like a strip mall
Hmm.
or like an area that's like, a Jenny's ice cream will be there, and then like a bookstore and this and that and this.
Hmm.
We have a lot of those in LA, and I'm always thinking, do people care that the majority of this space is meant for white people? It is owned by white people. There's no other people of color who are allowed to have these spaces, right? And then when we build our own spaces like that, there's so little investment in it because I find that black businesses don't only deserve to exist, but they deserve to exist in relationship to each other, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and this
Like
is
what
go ahead.
there's a strip mall here that Spice Suite opened,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's smaller, but when you talk about Black businesses existing in relationship to each other, that's like the one example
Right.
that DC
And it's
has.
wild because it's DC. Like I would say U Street is that, right? Like or used to be.
It
And
was,
it's
yeah.
just yeah, and whenever we do it, It's so profitable, it's so interesting, it's so culturally significant that it gets broken up. And this has been something I have noticed in every city that I have lived in, right? Like from living in Ohio, we had the Lincoln Arts District that was broken up by a freeway. When I moved to Pittsburgh for college, there was East Liberty. Them people got so mad because an artist put up a billboard that said Black people exist in the future. Shut that whole block down, right? Replace that with
Wow.
pizza and craft beers. Yeah. Also,
What?
a lot of people don't know this. Oh, yes. The Shadow Lounge used to be a very popular space over there. Next to the Shadow Lounge was a space called Conflict Kitchen, which they would serve different dishes that were made in places where there was conflict. So long before we actually started
Wow.
having a real national or global reckoning with Palestine, that was a place where you can get info on what was happening in Palestine through your food. And then
Wow.
over top of this space where we would go down from my college to party, to be with each other, to do all these things, there was an amazing billboard. I think it's in the Philly airport or the New Orleans airport. Either way, there was an ode to like Afrofuturism because
Mm.
this sign existed that said Black people exist in the future.
Hmm.
There was no problem with what that billboard had ever said before. And of course, people use this whole idea of like calling the city, calling different types of policing structures to
Yeah.
get it taken down. And now the billboard doesn't exist at all anymore, right? So it's like, I think about here in Los Angeles, Inglewood, bought and sold. Businesses are closing down by way of just being starved of resources to make
Yeah.
way for other things like the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot. And I wonder what of course, I don't think the answer is for us to not gather. I do think one of the answers is ownership, but
Hmm.
even with ownership, it has to be the right type of person because, as you're saying, there's a type of work that Black owners have to do to protect their
Yeah.
patrons.
Yep. Yeah.
You literally have to make sure they are safe from outsiders who are absolutely okay with calling the cops on them, right? And then
I'm
we also,
I thought you don't know how many times I thought about what would happen if somebody stormed inside of Ìpàdé.
mm, yeah,
That was a thing, like police, others, mass
which
shooters.
is not an idea. You are in Washington, D.C., where they were storming things, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The National
So,
Guard came to DC. I saw a big drop post
mm,
Trump's election with the National Guard, with people getting
right,
fired, the mass firings, mass layoffs, with the economy, with the start of any number of wars, who knows who we're fighting on any given day, or
mhm,
not we, Trump's
right,
administration, right? So those all affected my business,
right.
directly or indirectly, right?
And the
Directly,
truth is, it's affecting their business as well. But they are willing to still participate in the same systematic oppression to because they just do like
because they have a buffer, they have
right
the savings and resources and the means to say, we don't care about your little 10,000 a month. We have another tenant who's probably paying more than that and
mm,
who has a longer lease than you.
mm.
So you can go kick rocks, right? Um, if they have to let that building sit empty, they can
That's
afford to let that building sit empty.
yeah, which
So it's
they have done.
right. It's that kind of generational wealth that was likely acquired through nefarious means that is protected for them. And unfortunately, a lot of Black people don't have that kind of protection. Yes, there are wealthy Black people, but the majority don't even have savings.
Hmm
And I
hmm
know that from policy work.
Mm. So what is your, knowing what you know now, what is your offering or recommendation to people who are in this type of work where they're doing gatherings or they're building a business that has the desire to be brick and mortar?
Yeah, I would recommend being very thoughtful in this particular moment. And I would say that this particular moment may not be the moment to bring that to life. There
Mm,
are there's ideas and then there's timing and there's divine timing. Um, of course, I believe that you can do whatever you set your mind to. I was taught that growing up, and that's how I've done half the things I've done in my life is like, well, I'm gonna just go do it and see what happens. And I saw what happened. And, I did the thing. I could have invested more money and energy into Ipade, into bringing the 3.0 version to life, which would have been like, again, a different type of space, a different business model, certainly different location with certain amenities. But now was not the time for me personally, and now is not the time economically.
mhm,
So
mhm,
I wouldn't say give up at all. No, that's not even a question. It's being smart about how you do it, when you do it, how much you invest into it. And I think now's the time for what we call a minimum viable product, which is this
mhm,
testing, like put a little bit of money into it and see how it goes. Do you need to rent out a whole spot? So that's kind of what I did with the pop-ups prior to
mhm,
signing the first lease. I rented out a space for 3 days to do co-working.
mhm,
And it was through that kind of testing and gathering data about people's experience, what they needed, what they wanted. Um, Also gathering data for me, I'm like, okay, how much would it cost? How much could I earn? Um, I was doing MVPs before stepping into a lease. And again, that lease was also an MVP because it was 1 year. People have
Right,
20-year
right, right.
leases, you know?
That's true.
So, um, yeah, I definitely recommend taking a design approach, which I'm so glad I was introduced to design approach through some of the reproductive justice fellowships. Um, Taking things in steps, iterating, constantly assessing it, and getting into the cycle of implementation, evaluation, and going back into design,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
really honing what something could look like or how you could bring that to life in a way
mhm,
that protects you as a person, as a creative, as a business owner. Um, because this is honestly, once you building Ipare was my life for a while, for a long
mhm,
time.
mhm,
That's
mhm,
your life on the line. Like my personal resources going into the business, my time and energy going into the business,
mhm,
16-hour days, um, driving home in the middle of the night, going to sleep, waking up at 6 a.m. to come do it again the next day.
mhm,
So there's a cost and an input for every output.
mhm, mhm,
Um, what's it? It's input, output, outcomes. So there's some like public health like management model where it's like, yeah, you put things in and you get things out. And now is the time to really be thoughtful about, are you going to get out what you want based on what you put in? And I think the economy is set up in a way that we're right now it's tricky. It's a tricky question.
mhm.
Yeah.
I will say for folks, and this is something I've noticed just, moving about the cabin as I call it, but from a design aspect, I think more businesses need to think about who actually is going to be existing in your business. One of the things that will always be super important to me is the functionality of a space for people to participate in the thing that you want them to participate,
Hmm.
both from the user experience in and yours. Like one of the things we had to learn very early is how can these items move? Are they too heavy? Like one of your tables is definitely too heavy.
Oh my God.
Um,
What?
like how things can move if you're running a business where you do different kinds of setups. Is this, if you're saying that you want to run a listening room, is it actually conducive to not only the listening experience, but who actually is facilitating the sound, right? These are things that I think about. I was in a space recently where beautiful gowns, people love
Mm,
to focus on the aesthetic without thinking about how it's used. So think about who's the type. Can an elder sit down and get back up when
mm.
you into your space? A lot of young people are not think they love that ugly ass. Sorry, I shouldn't call it ugly. They love that bubble couch that's like this far from the ground.
Oh yeah, but
Over the age of 35,
shoot, I know I couldn't get up out of it. No.
bro, without assist or just like roll it around. Yes, things should think accessibility can be beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
something I want a lot of people to think about. There is a coffee shop here that I feel like I have no problem talking about them because they also, one of the things they enacted, in public design,
Hmm.
there's a difference between a bench that you can just sit on and a bench where it has those handlebars in the
Oh
middle
my
of.
God. So
Right.
unnecessary.
It's a type of functional policing, right? It's brutalism where it's meant
Yeah.
to keep certain people off, specifically people who are unhoused or
Yeah.
preventing people from laying down. And I think sometimes we say that kind of design is just targeted towards unhoused people, but it's also targeted towards people with bodies of different abilities. It's targeted towards people who are moving about the city with children. Like they're not
Mm,
thinking about none of that stuff and how it also impacts the people who you want using your product, right?
yeah.
Or using your space. So there's like a coffee shop here where they decided that they didn't actually want to be a third space. So they covered up their plugs, right? To prevent people from staying in there too long, right? And some businesses will say like, oh, it's a lot of wear and tear and this, that, and the fourth. But the reality is you never design your space for the real cost of wear and tear. Like I'm in there, I'm like, you want this to be a luxury experience, but all your chairs don't match. You want to raise your prices, but uh all your plants are dead. Not
Bruh.
just fine, they're dead. You haven't even removed that. You know what I mean? Or you want this to be a space where people play music, but you don't have CDJs, you don't have speakers, you don't have any of these things, and you don't know the vendors to bring those things in. One of the things I loved about Ipade, you kept a vendor, honey, a good one.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You kept a good vendor. So it's like, yeah, I think we have to think about things. And I think it's because I'm in a city obsessed with visuals and aesthetics.
Mm,
Like sometimes the aesthetics come last. Sometimes you need the
mm.
theory on how you want your space to function, and then you build the aesthetics on top of that.
Yeah, I think part of the really, really sad part of capitalism
Hmm.
is money over everything.
Everything.
And what I'm thinking about this coffee shop is they want people in and out to circulate coffee, but when people sit there, like, I don't know, you can also find ways to earn
How about
money by
this?
people
The coffee and the
congregating.
food, if you want people to keep buying stuff, you have to have food. How about the food is bad? So that's the thing. That be the thing is people be like, yeah, money over everything. But in order to make money, you do have to provide. a certain level of quality.
Equality. Yep.
You have to spend
That's
money.
that's one thing I always committed to and why I worked so hard
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted everyone to have a high quality, rich experience.
Mm,
I I never want I don't know, it was just really important to me. It's like I'm gonna do whatever it takes for people to say they had a good time or for people to not find a part of that is my perfectionism. I will say that's part of it, but it's also just a level of effort that leads to quality, good experience, good reputation. Um, and why would I do this if I was going to half-ass it? Why would I do this if people were going to come to the space and have trouble?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So there was always somebody working an event,
mm-hmm.
whether it was me or two other people that worked for me, even the interns could work events where it's like you're on site to help people utilize the space, right? We're not just dropping you off in a pretty place.
Right. Because
You're
that's
help
also how they fuck up your spot. Anyway.
uh things still happen, you know,
Yeah.
things were broken. Uh yeah, there was something broken I didn't even realize was broken until I was just pulling things out of the cabinet and I'm like, where did these teacups go? Because people would break stuff and put it in the trash or like sweep it up and then, you know.
Yeah.
So that again, wear and tear happens, and that's okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay, because that's something that happens when people come together. Stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as a business owner, you just prepare to go with the flow, to replace it, to like, okay, well, that's a lot, you know, that's gone, and okay, that's fine that that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, people would take little things as like souvenirs.
Child, when people was taking shit out of a party, that I was like, bring her stuff back. Ugh.
Bro, people really wanted souvenirs. And so that's when I did the little matchboxes.
Mm-hmm.
Look, it was an opportunity. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
you want to take some
No, I
stuff?
still think a little store would be cute.
Take this branded, take this logo. So what people did not want to take, so they wanted to take the real coasters. They did not want to take my paper branded Ipade coasters.
Wild.
But yeah, that's how you know you're doing things well. It's like, okay, people want
Yeah.
a souvenir. They
Leave
want
here
to
with some.
remember.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Like, I stole this from a party.
Luckily, it was just again little small stuff, small
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed Ipade. It was very fun. The creative process, putting it together, working with you, finding furniture, finding artwork and mirrors. It was a growth experience for me. And again, learning how to properly run a business, how to manage the finances,
Mm-hmm.
workflow, onboarding clients, onboarding customers, seeing them through the process, follow up, hiring, again, like getting vendors and people to do their thing in the space. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they did, like I worked with somebody, Tiara, who did tea parties, did vintage stuff, did she knew how to put the furniture together and I was like, oh, how'd you do this? Again, that's not my specialty. Um, I really enjoyed doing the makers markets, like
Yeah, those are cool.
that. Yeah, that was, I think, my favorite thing to do at Ipade was to use my platform and my space to have makers and creatives and emerging entrepreneurs share their work with the world, with the DuPont Circle community, with whoever's following me online, to have them get some income.
Mm-hmm.
And I always would buy something from each of them because I just love that. And I feel like that's part of my next thing that I want to do is something that takes that maker's market to the next level. Not necessarily physical.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, because again, that overhead is a killer, but that's what I really loved about Ipade, and that's what it clarified for me is that this is really about supporting people to do their thing.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
that's a beautiful lesson. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that I learned the most about it was I do enjoy putting people in a photo that they are not sure that they can experience in real life.
Mm,
That's a big thing that I enjoy is giving people an experience that they kind of have always wanted to have but wasn't sure how it would happen, and
mhm,
adding that and creating that through the lens of Black femme womanhood, uh,
mm.
like basically special places,
Yeah,
special places.
yeah. And you have done, and you have done.
Hmm.
One of the things I want people to know before we wrap is how my personal journey was interwoven into all of this. And
Hmm.
so during my time at Ìpàdé, I had a burnout because I was working too much, because I was, again, hustling, grinding. I was going to run myself into the ground to make sure that I, again, succeeded. And at that time, success was defined as staying open, continuing.
Hmm.
Um, I also realized in thinking back on like, okay, what happened in this part of my life? I also went through a divorce, and I realized I had defined the success of the marriage as staying married,
Mm.
continuing.
Mm.
And that's what
You preach
that's
it.
a word because
I mean, married people do say that. They're like, how do you avoid divorce? Stay married, which is a crazy thing to say. But anyway.
that's what we're told success is. You
Hmm.
start something, you continue it, you see it through, no matter what. So literally, like my marriage and Ìpàdé have a similar theme of I did the best I could. I did the thing. It worked for some time. It was it was great at what it was, and then it was no longer working. And that's knowing when to say goodbye is a thing. So I learned to say goodbye, and while I was I said goodbye to my marriage while I was at Ìpàdé. Um, Shortly after the divorce was finalized, my father had a stroke and passed away.
Hmm.
And my father was my first model of an entrepreneur. He never worked for anyone really. Like
Hmm.
he was the entrepreneur. He was also a workaholic, so I got good things from him and bad things from him, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But with those major life changes, I asked myself the question, what do I want the rest of my life to look like?
Hmm.
And I recently realized that none of that included Ìpàdé.
Mm.
It just wasn't there. And I didn't realize that until a couple days ago, again, as I was thinking like, okay, how's this conversation going to go? That's where I talk about like, oh, the spiritual component coming in, because I clarify for myself what I want the rest of my life to look like.
Mm.
And working my ass off to pay rent
Mm.
was not included. And so the universe realigned itself. That's why I say I'm not necessarily mad or sad about Ìpàdé closing,
Mm.
because it wasn't aligned with me. And part of that was the universe saying, that's not part of your future.
Mm.
And we're gonna make it so that you can go into the future you actually want.
Mhm.
And that's difficult to go through in the moment. Yeah. Do I
Mm.
want to be fighting citations? No. Do I want to be fighting with these girls at the yoga studio? Maybe occasionally for fun as an Aries, but not really, right? Like I need a good fight every once in a while, but like no. And
Wow.
I said, okay, I want Ìpàdé to exist. Maybe it's just not me for me. And so I did try to find somebody who would want to take it on. And but I also prayed at the same time, if it's not for them, if it's not for their greatest good, don't, then it's not going to happen. And it didn't happen.
Mm.
So I have peace that I tried what I needed to. I did what I needed to do. I'm clear on what I want for my future, generally clear, right? And I'm also clear that this experience has shown me if I I know what I can accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
If so,
Mm-hmm.
if I want to do it in the future, I can do it again. Of course, with fortified with all the lessons learned and the knowledge that I have. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the spiritual component of it. And I don't know if you have anything on the spiritual tip that you want to share.
Um, no, I'm just, I think watching you through this, yeah, you've always had a spiritual guidance around it.
Mm.
Even what I'm hearing you say about like figuring out that a real desire you had was around the market. You really love the market.
Hmm.
You love bringing people. You do. You are really great at seeing talent and perspective in other folks, and bringing them in. And I also really love and admire you for talking about your divorce because even um, you're such a beacon for people who don't understand that like you can just choose the like it doesn't have to be some massive fallout. And I think as a black lesbian woman looking at black straight women, be honest about that is what is needed. Like I think about the women in my life, my sisters, my mother, my grandmother. I've watched them just continue.
Hmm.
And that cost over time is significant.
Hmm. Absolutely.
It can feel minor in the moment, especially when you're trying to be a representation or so forth. But like
Yeah.
over time,
It'll wear you down.
oh my goodness. My grandmother, love her dearly. She was a true matriarch. And I
Mhm.
think the hardest part about watching her pass was like in her final days, pulling a stool up to the stove to cook for her husband, who was paid
No.
by, oh, yes. And it's important for me to see that and know that that is what I come from.
Mm.
Sometimes, especially when you leave home and you do your own journey, all these other things, you can like judge that. And it's like,
Mhm.
honey, that is of you, and you need to be scanning your life to see what you're doing that for.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're no better. Okay. Patriarchy
Right.
is taught, and we've all been taught it more times than we've been taught to like decenter and all these other things. But even in decentering men and decentering capitalism, you still have to be centered on something. You have to value something. Who is
Mhm.
it going to be? And I think people are getting to those answers and are seeing you choose yourself. So, and similarly, like I made that choice when I walked
You
away from
did.
politics.
Yeah, you did.
I was like,
And you
oh,
have flourished so much. And I've been so proud. Like I was proud to
you've been there
see,
for every
witness.
part of
Yeah.
it. Every time I look up, you are the first adapter, Elizabeth. And
Yeah, yeah.
I don't say this enough. Like that really, you don't even know. Like
Oh. Well, I love seeing it. If I could have made it out for your the
the first show, Toxic Therapy.
yes,
Yes,
I
yes.
would have, but it's just I was like, can
Y'all
I go?
have
Like,
time. Y'all have time. I'm gonna officially invite y'all to one of them.
yes, please do because
Yeah,
I'll fly out for that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and
That
thank
was a
you.
big new thing when I did that.
What?
When I
The
left DC, like
Oh
I
yeah.
really just thought that was gonna be my whole life.
Yeah. Again, I remember asking you when I'm like, how did we get here? How did we get here? But Ipade, I mean, not Ipade, life just takes you on a journey
Mhm,
and things come and go. And
mhm,
I think I'm learning and I've learned not to hold too tight onto anything and to
mhm,
embrace the next adventure. Like this is not the first thing I've left, right? Like there's been many things, little projects things I've done and movements I've started and um walked away from and closing the business. And at the same time, oh, there was this great quote that I came across like, does the bee know what it's pollinating? Like in going about its daily life. I need to find the exact quote, but in going about just trying to like do its thing, does the bee know that it's making life happen, that it's making
Mm,
these flowers bloom? And I take that to heart because I trust that in all the things that I've done and will do, that I'm leaving behind influence and impact and opportunity and something. And there's no way for me to know, right? Who's looked, who's participated, who's been impacted or affected. I just know that um that's happening. And so that's enough for
yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. You moved through. Yeah. I think even hearing you say this is like, um, yeah. I think because you do good work and hard work that things should always go your way.
Oh yeah. Mm-mm.
But we don't actually live in a meritocracy. Like I've been
These
really
are
learning.
facts.
Yeah, we just, especially as Black women, it's like you could literally be the best, and people would be like, "So what?" That you have to find it. You have to find it for yourself. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's been my watching you. That's been. I'm glad to be affirmed in the knowing of that. Like sometimes there's no real solid reason why something happens. It's just happening. You are there to like respond and to grieve and to feel your
Hmm.
emotions. Um, but you didn't do anything wrong but live, like you.
Right. No,
And
no.
again, we already know because we didn't been all types of places and worked all types of jobs. Like all of it is a building brick. Like you
Yeah.
learn something from all of it that you can learn that you can use later down the line. So I'm just glad my life keeps bringing me back to you, girl.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully, we stay lifelong friends and stay in touch. And
Yeah.
I'll be flying out for all the projects and things you do.
Mhm.
And we'll see where life takes us.
Okay.
Mhm. Well, thank you for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. And thank you for I mean, truly an inspiring journey watching you build Daddy Pate, honey.
Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for your contributions and support. And yeah, again, so more than we could ever talk about on
Oh
a,
gosh, no.
yeah.
Everybody loves when my favorite story is us with those coffee mugs. When you came in with all them different coffee mugs with them different sayings on them, I was like, absolutely not, girl. My mom still brings that up. She'd be like, send them to me. I'm like,
Girl,
I use
these,
nothing else.
but look, Home Goods has not given us a Black History Month like that
That
ever
is
since.
true. That is true.
So
Diversity
you should have
Monday
got
is
your
over.
mugs. Should have got your mug when you had the chance.
You so silly. That is true, honey. That is true. Diversity is done. You ain't gonna find no Frida Kahlo.
We had nothing. We've had nothing since.
That's crazy to think about. I don't care. They still could have done better with the design.
I was so proud of myself too. I
It's
got all
cute.
these mugs.
I was like, we can pick some mugs that are the same.
Mm-mm-mm.
Oh, good times. Okay.
Good time. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.